best behavior today because we've got Rice County Attorney John Fossum in studio, and he could have me arrested.
Well, I can't. Only the sheriff can arrest you, but I can only ask nicely.
Yeah, but I mean, you could call him in a heartbeat and say, arrest this man. And you could, think of something that I was doing wrong.
Well,
that's not how it works.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's not how it works. It's, it's one of the things we were talking about off air is what my,
right,
and that's one of the misconceptions is that we have all this power to do things. And to me, what I have isn't a lot of power. What I have is a lot of obligations. I have a responsibility to everybody that we come into contact with to make sure that we're being fair and we're doing good work. My predecessor in office, Jeff Thompson, explained this job to me better than anybody else ever has. He said that it's really 4 jobs in one. That first, you're the elected official, so you have to go out and explain yourself. I have to come out and talk to people and tell them what my office does and what we're doing, like coming to talk to you.
Right.
I'm a department head. I have 17 people who work for me in the office, and so I've got to manage all of those 17 employees and make sure that they're on task and doing their work, and that I get some other work done. That I'm civil counsel for the county. We're responsible for doing all of the civil legal work for the county. So if somebody wants to sue the county, if there's a property line issue, if there's a highway issue, if there's other issues going on in the county, there's things that the county board wants to do, that's our obligation in my office to deal with that. And then the part of my job that most people are familiar with is as chief prosecutor, that I am responsible to prosecute all of the felony cases in Rice County. And we also prosecute a lot of the gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor, but all the misdemeanor and traffic cases that occur outside of our 5 cities, that Northfield, Faribault, Lonsdale, Morristown, Dundas, all have their own city prosecutors, and they deal with their misdemeanor and traffic cases. But we deal with all the ones that happen. Freeway is our case, but so is murder. So we handle everything from speeding to murder in my office.
So I'm guessing that's what you like, with the variety.
I like the variety. I like the work. Even when we're prosecuting cases, we have a lot of competing interests. We're looking out for the interests of the public. We're trying to protect public safety. We have to make sure that we're providing a fair result. We want to protect the community. We want to make sure that we're not being unfair to the person being prosecuted. We can't hide the ball. We got to make sure we're getting all the information out to them so that they have a fair defense. And we can't play games with that either.
And you did do some defense work, right?
I did for about 20 years. I was a part-time public defender and in private practice for 20 years. I also did a lot of civil work in that time. I mean, it was part of my practice. It wasn't the only thing I've ever done. I've always had a wide variety, and that's, I think, part of what prepared me for doing this job. Is
sure.
That I had touched everything that this office touches, and so because I've done everything, sometimes from a different perspective, I was prepared to deal with it coming in. I
know we were chatting off there before going on the air. You mentioned the fact that you enjoy working with police.
Oh, I do. And, we're lucky in Rice County. We have excellent police departments. We've got Northfield, Faribault, and the sheriff's office all have excellent departments and really good leadership, and that's one of the things that we're really lucky to do, and that tends to make our job a lot easier.
I'll bet it does. We'll touch on that in the next segment. Again, John Fossum is with us. He's Rice County Attorney. The reason we asked, we'd like to have John on every month, but specifically this month, it is Law Month. It's National Law Month. May 1st was National Law Day, right?
Right. It's traditionally May is Law Month, and May Day is Law Day.
Do you know why that was chosen? Do you have any idea? I
don't know.
Okay.
I didn't research that. I didn't know you
That's fine.
asked me that
No, that's quite all right. It's quite all right, John. There's not a big deal. So let's get back into your office. Could you tell us, you said you had 17 employees.
Right. I've got 8 lawyers. 4 are prosecutors. 1 does juveniles and prosecution, and 3 more do the civil work. And that's one of the things people forget about our office is we do a lot of things that are civil law. We help collect child support for people. We make sure that once there's a child support order in place, that the child support is getting paid. We help collect child support. Sometimes that's reimbursing social services for money that they've paid out for their family, and then we collect the child support and it gets paid back to social services. So that's one of the things that we wind up doing. We do child protection cases, and that's one of the things you and I were talking about earlier off air, is that one of the things that's really changed in the last couple of years is our child protection roughly tripled. And part of that is the work of the Rice County, or the Cannon River Valley, the Cannon Valley Drug and Violent Offender Task Force.
Right.
Is that they've come into contact with a lot of people who have kids and who have drugs. And when that happens, we wind up having to take the kids into custody. We take the parents into custody, and we have to deal with that process, all of that case through the system. And that has been one of the bigger challenges for our office in the last couple of years, is just kind of keeping up with that child protection caseload. And the prosecution, we've had a lot of extra cases to prosecute because our drug task force has been doing good work, but we're able to manage that a lot more easily. Those cases we can deal with and spread them around a little bit, but we have one lawyer doing our child protection cases, and we had to move some other assignments away to spread out among the other lawyers because of the extra burden of that caseload.
Wow. How's drug court working?
Drug court has had 3 graduates so far, and we have a couple of more who I think are probably in line to graduate in the next couple of months, which is tremendous. And one of the things I've told the people when they do graduate is that if you've graduated from this program, if you've spent now a couple of years being clean and sober after years, sometimes decades of not being, you are one of the most impressive people I've met, because that is an accomplishment. Drug court it's a challenge for a lot of us who are accustomed to the punitive nature of the court system, and to say that we're looking at treatment, we're looking at doing things on behalf of the criminal community, or dealing with these people who have committed crimes, and saying, okay, we're going to focus on what is driving your criminal activity rather than on the fact that you committed something that is a crime. And we're going to help try and get to the root of that problem and deal with your issues and work through that system. It's a difficult thing for somebody to finish drug court. We ask a lot of people. They have really intensive supervision. They get random and regular drug tests. They have to complete treatment. They have to show that they have to be working. They have to have a GED, and they have to be pretty functional by the time they get out of drug court.
So is the agreement then not to charge them?
No,
if they graduate,
they've been convicted.
Okay.
This is our drug court program is a post-conviction drug court, so it doesn't wipe away the criminal activity. What it does is it's a very intensive supervision program that we do instead of incarceration. And so it's not a pre-walk. It's you do all of this, and when you're done, you're now a productive member of society, right? That's the goal we're looking for. So we've got people who are working, paying taxes, and have prospects in the future, as opposed to people who are still struggling and using and committing crimes.
So hopefully you don't see them again.
That's the goal.
Having said that, I think I told you earlier, a couple of days ago we visited with the chief deputy of the Northfield Police Department, who told me, because I asked him, what's the biggest challenge of the department? Said he thought a little bit, and then he said, a majority of the calls we go on, many of the people are suffering from mental illness, and there's nothing we can do. We don't have resources. These people don't really belong in jail, but we have no place else to take them.
And that's been an issue, too, where we have someone who is charged of a crime, guilty of a crime, but the court finds, and we've had one of those cases recently, the court finds that the person was not competent at the time, was what we call Rule 2002, that they were not guilty by reason of mental illness or deficiency. And what that means is that then we're supposed to commit them into a civil commitment system, and as mentally ill and dangerous, because they're presumed to be, because they were committing a crime because of their mental illness. Now they're mentally ill and dangerous, but the system is so overloaded, the state doesn't have beds to put them in. So even if we have an order to put someone into a state hospital, we have a real challenge finding the beds in the hospitals to put them in, because the state system has shrunk so much in the last 20, 30 years that there's no treatment facilities left to commit people to. Or there's so few that we have people sitting in jail, and we have an order of committing them to the state hospital. The state hospital says, we don't have room. You'll have to keep holding them in the jail. And that's a tremendous burden on our jail. Tremendous burden on our jailers. Tremendous burden on our law enforcement officers. And it's not, it's not the best thing for the community either. So that's one of the things we really need to look for, is more resources to treat and deal with those mental health issues.
And I'm guessing they've been here a long time. We just didn't recognize it before.
Well, I think that the opportunities for placement have really dwindled. I think that there were a lot more opportunities. There was a lot more programming available when I was a young lawyer than there are now that I'm an old lawyer.
Which is unfortunate.
Yes. And I think that's one of the real challenges that we've had, and I've talked to our legislators about that, and probably tell them the same thing every year. But it is a tremendous challenge for us in terms of what do we do with people if the jail can't hold them and there's no other place that will.
I don't envy your dilemma there.
Yeah, it is a tremendous challenge in terms of, and what's the right thing to do in that situation? I mean, we don't want them in the community because they're not safe in the community.
Right.
We don't want them in the jail because they're not safe in the jail, and the place that we want to put them doesn't have room for them. And that is a tremendous problem.
So I had psychologist Eric Lundin on yesterday, and he said the same thing. We need beds, preferably local beds, because the chief deputy told me earlier this week he personally had escorted people to Fargo to get service, mental health services.
Right. Oh, and they've taken people. I know they've taken people to the Sioux Falls and Fergus. The state hospital in Wilmer is no longer there, so we're down to Anoka, and the state hospital in St. Peter doesn't have nearly as many beds as it did 20 years ago, and so this closing of these facilities has not been we haven't gone to that community health system that was supposed to result from shutting down those facilities and closing beds there. So we shut down one system and we didn't open up the other one. And so, yeah, that is the problem. There needs to, if we're going to have that community health system, we need the beds to put people in.
And again, I'm not saying that we need to forgive these people of their crime. Obviously, they still need to be charged. But if we don't want them to commit crimes again, we probably should treat their mental issues.
And if their mental issues are what's causing their criminal conduct, then we absolutely need to treat their mental issues so that they can be safe in the community and we can be safe in the community. And that's obviously ultimately the goal that we need to get to.
Would you agree that a high percentage of criminals are dealing with mental health issues?
I don't know. I couldn't really estimate the percentage. I mean, I know there's certainly a noticeable percentage. I think that chemical issues account for a much larger percentage of our criminal population than mental health issues. But mental health issues are certainly a component for a lot of people.
Yeah, I did have a warden tell me one time from the Faribault Correctional Facility, this is years ago, I think shortly after it first opened, Warden Holbeck, I don't know if you remember.
I don't.
Anyway, I remember he told me at the time like 80% of the inmates were under the influence of something when they committed their crime.
Right. And there's certainly, and I don't know what the numbers are really, but there is a large percentage of that, and one of the things that we have to deal with. But simply being under the influence doesn't necessarily excuse the crime.
No.
And it's actually a lot easier for us to deal with the people with chemical issues at the moment than it is for us to deal with the people with mental health issues. One of the real challenges is the people who are using chemicals to self-treat their mental health issues, and that's a tremendous challenge. Getting them on the right medication, a legal medication that they can afford or that they have the resources to pay for, as opposed to the street drugs that they've been using to treat their own mental health issues that they've self-diagnosed.
So it's kind of a combination of things.
It can be, it's never simple. There's always a lot of things going on. And so there's always a lot of things to look at. It's tempting to look at things as just, it's very simple. I know what this is. But in reality, there's always a lot of factors that need to be considered when we're looking at stuff.
Was there anything when you first took over this office that kind of surprised you, that you really weren't aware of? I mean, you said you talked to Jeff Thompson about it, of course, but...
Yeah, most of it I was prepared for. There were... one of the things that was most surprising to me was that I didn't realize that I had to review all of the unattended deaths in the county. So I read all the reports where someone dies and they're not under the care of a physician at the time. So if the coroner makes a ruling, then I have to review that and issue my own determination based on the reports of the law enforcement and the coroner.
And there are a lot of those?
More than I would have thought.
Okay.
And it's a couple of months, but every now and then it seems like a lot. But that's one of the things too about law enforcement that people don't understand, that they think they're always dealing with crimes, but they deal with a lot of stuff that isn't criminal. They deal with a lot of
serving.
Right, just checking on someone who no one's heard from for a while and find them dead in the apartment. I mean, that's always a challenge, and I think they go through a lot on our behalf.
Yeah. Again, John Fossum is our guest. He is Rice County's attorney, and we certainly appreciate John taking time out of his busy schedule. May is Law Month. I just threw out, when I was promoting today's show, up on Facebook, up on Twitter, all these great social media things that we have nowadays, that it would be quite a world if we didn't have laws. Can you even imagine a world without laws?
Well, Gordy, I spent a year in Afghanistan, so I have some experience with that. I also spent some time in Russia, shortly after the fall in 1992. I spent a couple of weekends there, or spent a weekend there once, and it was obvious that there was no one in charge. There was no real legal system. And so, we have plenty of examples of what life is like without law in the world. I mean, there's Afghanistan, Somalia, where there isn't a rule of law, where there isn't a way to redress grievances peacefully. And that's the whole point of law, that if you and I have a disagreement, we have a place to go where we can resolve it, and it isn't about who's the strongest or who has the biggest, has the best weapons. That's the whole point of law, is that we, and to protect ourselves. I mean, one of the questions I always ask people about, when is Afghanistan going to work? What do they need first? Do they need security, or do they need an economy? Well, you can't have one without the other, but I don't know which one you get first.
Right. Like the chicken and the egg thing.
Right.
Interesting. But, I often wonder about that. Where would we be if we didn't have laws?
Yeah, well, and one of my functions when I was working in Afghanistan was to train the police and the prosecutors. So I'd work with the investigative police and work with the prosecutors. And we tried to make sure that they were using their formal legal system. And we also tried to make sure that they weren't doing what we understood a lot of the police and prosecutors were doing, which was to take and arrest somebody with a truckload of heroin or opium, and for a certain amount of money, let them go.
Now, I don't remember if we touched on this before, but DWI cases.
Sure.
You see a number of those, I'm sure.
Right.
And on some other media, I've heard an ad from an attorney suggesting that when you get pulled over for a DWI, there's something about you have to consent to do a test, right? Or not? How does that work?
What happens is we give people an opportunity to take a breath test.
Yeah, but if you don't do it, you lose.
If you don't do it, that can be a bigger crime than taking the test and failing. And we can also, if there's reason to do it, we can get a warrant for a blood test or a urine test for someone. And at this point, basically, that's one of the things that we've wound up doing as a result of Supreme Court precedent from last year, where they made it clear that we needed a warrant to have a blood test. So we offer people the opportunity to take a breath test. If they don't do it, they'll be charged with refusing. If we can't do a breath test, then we may get a warrant for a blood test. And that would then be the evidence as to whether or not the person was under the influence, whether they make that per se limit of 0.08 or whatever the test result winds up being.
This can be very spendy.
Oh, it can be. I mean, if you've racked up a couple of them, or if you have a high blood alcohol concentration of 0.16 or above, and it's not your first time through, we can take your license plates, and you could have to buy the whiskey plates. After 3 or 4, we could take your car and forfeit the vehicle. So, plus you lose your driver's license, and you got to pay a bunch of money to get it back. You could have to get one of those intoxilizers installed into the car, the Alco sensors, which is expensive to do, and then you got to pay a monthly rent on that. So
your insurance probably goes up.
Your insurance definitely goes up. So it's an expensive mistake to make. So obviously we recommend that people don't drink and drive, because it's not just expensive to you, it's dangerous. A lot of bad things can happen.
Fishing openers this weekend.
Yeah.
Highly recommend not have a designated driver in the boat, right?
Well, and it's Mother's Day too, so I recommend, staying out of trouble for Mother's Day, but
want to make mom happy.
You want to make mom happy, but yeah, you can actually get a DWI for boating as well. That if you're operating a motor vehicle, and that includes a boat, if you're operating a boat while you're under the influence of alcohol, 0.08 or above, you could be charged with DWI for that as well.
Is it the exact same penalty then?
It is. It's the same penalties. except for, I don't think you'll use your driver's license on that one, but I haven't prosecuted one of those, so I'd have to look it up. But it's pretty similar in terms of the effects on you. And
speaking of that, I was talking to the sheriff earlier this week, and he couldn't recall what the particulars are, because you had a recent arrest made of an individual who was accused of DWI. And so I asked when the formal charges need to be filed, and it was within either 32 or 48 hours or 36 or 48 hours, whatever it was. Yeah.
So within 36 hours, if we've got somebody in custody, within 36 hours we have to get a judge to say there's probable cause to hold this person and or set a bail. And so that has to happen within 36 hours. So if we pick somebody up on Friday night, on Saturday morning, we have to get information to a judge. And the way we do that in this district is we, each of our judicial district is 11 counties. So each of the 11 counties gathers up their information and sends it to one of the judges in the district, who is on call, and they decide whether or not the person should be held or what the bail should be if they want to get out. And that's what could hold them until Monday. But within 48 hours, and that doesn't include the Saturday, but within 48 hours we have to get them in front of a judge. So if we pick somebody up on Friday night, we have to have the charges filed and the person in front of a judge on Monday morning, and we do them at 11 o'clock. So we have to do it very quickly, and normally we'll get the reports from the police early Monday morning and get the complaint processed and through the system so that they can appear in court by 11 o'clock. So it can be a very busy time on most mornings because we wind up having people in custody very frequently.
All right. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. That's today's edition of Bay Minnesota and KDHLAM Faribault, Minnesota. Beautiful weekend. Be safe.